Tonight, find a cozy spot and let the rain and thunder sounds carry you to sleep. Sink into your pillow, pull your blankets up tight, and close your eyes. Get comfortable and enjoy tonight's romantic sleep story for grown-ups. In this story, we'll travel to a quiet cabin in the heart of a misty, rain-soaked forest. Inside, with a fire crackling and a cup of tea in hand, a woman named Emily is waiting. Her heart is full, but a piece of her is missing, and with every patter of rain on the roof, she hopes the sound is a little closer to the one thing that will make her feel complete. There's nothing like the deep peace of the forest as the rain pours outside, a soft, rhythmic drumming on the roof, signaling the approaching thunderstorm as the gray clouds roll in. Aside from a few lingering bird calls, the world is quiet, and the comfort of the crackling fireplace feels like all the company you need. It's relaxing and cozy, but even with the warmth of the steaming tea in her hands, Emily still feels a piece of herself is missing. By the front door, Jasper, the loyal golden retriever, rests his head on his paws, his ears perked at the slightest sound. His tail thumps a soft rhythm against the wooden floor each time a noise hints at his return. Meanwhile, their black and white cat, Sebastian, with a distinct pink nose, sleeps soundly by the fireside, his paws occasionally twitching before pulling back into a tight, contented ball. Emily took a few sips of her tea, the warmth of the ceramic mug seeping into her hands as she watched the rain streak down the window of her cozy cabin. She soaked up the quiet peacefulness of her surroundings, the air heavy with the earthy scent of pine and wood smoke. She listened carefully for the low, rolling sounds of the thunder that had been slowly approaching all afternoon. It had kept her inside all day, but she didn't mind. It had been months since Ethan left on his mission for the Air Force. He was slowly climbing the military chain of command, and they had discussed how he would be away for months at a time. This had been the longest they had ever been apart, and she missed him more than words could say. His calls were infrequent, as he didn't have the opportunities to make personal calls, but he still managed to write to her. He thought it was romantic, and so did she. A stack of his letters, their paper soft and worn from her rereading them over and over, sat on the coffee table in front of the sofa. She put her cup down to reach one of his recent letters. Although he couldn't tell her what he was doing, he still managed to write things he probably would have never said in person. The letters felt even more intimate than when they were together, as he opened up about his deepest thoughts and how much he missed and loved her. Emily loved reading his letters. They were a profound comfort that made her feel so close to him. With each vulnerable thought he expressed, their relationship grew deeper and more meaningful. She loved holding his letters in her hands, the paper worn, soft and familiar. She ran her fingertips over the dark, distinct lines of his handwriting, noticing the firm pressure of his strokes and the familiar little loop he always put on his lowercase a's. Seeing the words he had written felt like seeing a part of him that had traveled so far just to reach her. Holding the creased pages felt like holding a part of him, a physical weight in her hands that settled a deep warmth in her heart. He clearly loved her too, sending her a letter each week he had been away, a tangible promise of his return. Emily was a photographer, and a successful one at that, usually focusing on wedding photography. She had taken many photos of them over the years, and now they were scattered throughout the cabin, part of the little details that made their home truly theirs. On the mantel, a candid shot caught him laughing, his head thrown back as he stood by the lake, a tiny silver fish on the end of his line. On the kitchen counter, a small picture showed him chopping wood in his favorite flannel shirt, the morning light glowing on his face. On the bookshelf, a photo booth strip captured 4 quick shots of them, culminating in a messy, joyful kiss. She spotted another on the fridge, a group photo from a summer trip, all of them in kayaks on a wide, calm lake. And her favorite, a worn picture from the last Christmas, with Ethan's 3-year-old nephew perched on his shoulders, both of them wearing ridiculous Santa hats. She sat and read each letter over again, pausing to remember his face and fantasizing about his return. She missed the scent of his skin and the feeling of his soft hair as it slipped through her fingertips. She missed his hands upon her waist and the feel of her own squeezing the sides of his strong arms, the familiar bump of his triceps. The memory of his kiss on her lips was so vivid, so soft, warm, and gentle that she could almost feel it, and she remembered the warm weight of her hand upon his chest as if she could feel the beat of his heart. She missed him, warm and present beside her, and the simple freedom of being able to return his touch. She missed the familiar tickle of his 5 o'clock shadow, a small detail that always felt like him. She couldn't wait for him to come home. As she sat on the sofa, the rainy afternoon drowsiness began to set in. The warmth of the blanket on her lap and the soft cushion she was leaning on were a perfect invitation to rest. When Sebastian decided to join her, curling up contentedly on her lap, his deep purring became a soft, steady rumble she could feel against her stomach. A wave of deep contentment washed over her, and she allowed the rhythmic drumming of the rain and the low rumble of the thunder to guide her into a peaceful afternoon nap. It wasn't until a sharp bark from Jasper jolted her awake that she noticed the sun had begun to set. The golden retriever was pawing at the front door, his entire body bouncing with excitement, usually reserved for a walk in the woods. Then she heard it, the low rumble of an engine. Headlights cut through the twilight, sweeping across the cabin windows. Emily's heart began to pound, a wild, breathless rhythm. Could it be he had finally come home to her? She rushed to her feet, her blanket falling to the floor, and threw open the door. He stepped out of the car, his form a sharp silhouette against the glow of the setting sun. Even in the dim light, she could see his dark, wind-swept curls slightly damp from the rain, framing his face. His strong jawline was softened by a faint stubble, and his eyes, though tired, held an intense warmth she knew so well. His worn military jacket spoke of a world far away from this cabin, but she didn't see the uniform. Her eyes were fixed on the slow, tired smile that broke across his face, a smile of pure, unguarded relief and joy. In that moment, with the rain pouring down and the sky flashing behind him, he was her rock, the very foundation of her feeling of home. With his gaze, he was telling her he was home, and a wave of pure, unadulterated happiness washed over her. Jasper's paws hit Ethan's chest with a joyful thud, knocking his hat right off his head. Ethan stumbled back from the dog's wild greeting, laughing as he ruffled the fur around Jasper's face. "Did you miss me, boy?" "Yeah, I missed you too," he said, grabbing Jasper's paws and holding him up. But at the sight of Emily approaching, his focus shifted entirely. He gave Jasper a signal, firm command, and the obedient golden retriever immediately ran back inside the cabin, sitting by the front door, his tail thumping a frantic rhythm against the wooden floor as he held back his excitement. He ran towards her, not caring about the rain that plastered his uniform to his body. His heart pounded, a frantic rhythm that matched her own. The setting sun cast a golden light through the downpour as a flash of lightning lit up the sky behind them, and then he was there. His hands gripped her waist, pulling her flesh against his soaking body as her hands instinctively went to his face, her fingers digging into his wet hair. She didn't have to tiptoe. He leaned down, and their lips crashed together in a desperate, consuming kiss that tasted of rain and longing. They stood in the rain, kissing, the cool water dripping down their faces, a testament to the fact that nothing else mattered. Without a break in their kiss, Ethan swept Emily off her feet and carried her toward the cabin, their lips remaining fused together as she held his face. In that moment, she could think of nothing except feeling him and wanting him, the desire taking over. They stumbled into the cabin, a flurry of wet clothes and hungry kisses. The passion from the rain-soaked reunion had followed them inside, and they laughed breathlessly, their desperate smiles a mirror of their longing. They peeled off his soaking jacket and her sweater, letting them fall to the floor in a pile that joined the wet puddles at the entrance. "God, I've missed you so much, Emily," he breathed against her lips, his words a desperate, raw admission that melted into a continued kiss. He then lifted her onto the kitchen counter, her hands shaking with a mix of cold and emotion, fumbling at the buttons of his drenched white dress shirt. The waterlogged fabric clung to his skin as she slowly, painstakingly unbuttoned it, him continuing to rain kisses on her lips, her cheeks, and her neck as his hands roamed her body freely. The frantic passion slowly began to soften into a deep, tender relief. Once they caught their breath, she unbuttoned the last button on his dress shirt, slowly peeling it off his broad shoulders while she gazed into his eyes. He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, and in their depths, he found all the love and longing he had carried with him. He gently tucked a damp strand of her hair behind her ear, his fingertips slowly tracing the delicate line of her cheek and the familiar curve of her body. They fell into each other's arms, holding on tight as they breathed in the familiar sense of their partnership. Still without a word, Emily took his hand and led him toward their bedroom, closing the door behind them. Ethan followed eagerly behind her like a lovesick puppy, his eyes tracing every one of her curves as they left the living room behind. Jasper, unfortunately, would have to wait outside until his human companions returned. The rain and thunder continued to pour, but inside everything felt warm and still. Now comfortably in his undergarments, Ethan tended to the fire, the glow of the flames casting a warm light on the room. He walked across the cool wooden floor, the familiar texture of comfort beneath his feet. He took a lantern from the mantel, the strike of the match a sharp sound in the quiet room, and held it to the wick. A small flame flickered to life, and the scent of burning wax filled the air, mingling with the earthy smell of the forest that had found its way inside. He left Emily curled up in their bed, telling her that he would prepare dinner for them tonight. As he worked, a deep, contented sigh escaped him, and he let his mind drift back to the memories he had clung to while he was away. He knelt to pour some food into Sebastian's dish, and the cat rubbed against his hand, purring loudly. Ethan scooped the cat into his arms, burying his face into its warm, soft fur for a moment before setting him back down. Then he spent some time with Jasper, his furry friend who had missed him terribly, playing a bit of tug-of-war with a rope and giving him a long-awaited tummy rub. Jasper's tail thumped a dramatic rhythm on the floor as he looked up at Ethan. He looked at the pictures on the walls, each one a reminder of a treasured memory they shared. He realized everything he desired in this world was right here. The sound of the rain outside, the crackle of the fire to keep them company, and the profound feeling of being home. Everything just felt right here, in their cabin in the woods. He was going to make the best of his time over the next few days before he had to inevitably return to another mission. But he was going to make every single moment count while he was here. He had it all planned. Tonight he would prepare a romantic, creamy chicken and mushroom pasta, a small token of his desperate attempt to fill the space his absence had created. The rich aroma of his cooking began to fill the cabin, blending with the earthy scent of the wooden walls, the lingering warmth of the fire, and the fresh herbs from their small backyard garden. He moved around the kitchen with a focused, almost frantic energy, the gentle sizzle of garlic in the pan, and the soft clink of a wine bottle, the only sounds besides the rain against the window pane. This was his penance, a desperate attempt to make something perfect. The low light from the lamps and the warm glow of the fire danced across the kitchen walls, casting a golden hue over everything he touched. When the pasta was ready, he carefully plated each dish, his hands a little unsteady, and sprinkled a pinch of fresh parsley over the top. He lit 2 small candles on the dining table, their gentle light flickering against the dark backdrop of the cabin windows. Finding Emily still curled up in their bed reading a book, a soft smile on her face, he knelt beside her. "Dinner's ready," he whispered, his hands gently covering her eyes. "Thank you for waiting for me." He then guided her toward the dining table, his touch gentle but firm, as if worried she might disappear. "Just a little further," he murmured. He positioned her in front of the table, then slowly slid his hands away, revealing the flickering candlelight, the beautifully plated dishes, and the bottle of white wine. Emily's eyes fluttered open, a small gasp escaping her lips. "Ethan." A wave of pure happiness washed over Emily's face as she finally saw the full, loving gesture. He didn't just come home. He was her home. As they sat across from each other at the small table, she reached for his hand, weaving her fingers through his. She didn't want a single part of him to be out of her reach. While she was overjoyed to be with him and listening to him talk about his mission in broad strokes, her thoughts were bittersweet. It was so hard living life through letters and the occasional phone call, a life where she felt stuck waiting for him to come home while taking photos of other couples who were building their future. But in this moment, with his hands in hers, she could almost forget the world outside the cabin and the time they had lost. After dinner, as they cozied up together, Ethan surprised her with a small, flat package wrapped in a plain brown paper and tied with a simple piece of string. Emily took her time with the string, her movements slow and deliberate as she carefully unwrapped it. When she finally opened it, a heavy leather-bound journal was revealed. She opened it to the first page, and a handwritten poem filled the page, its words a raw and heartfelt testament to his longing. On the pages that followed, he had created a beautiful mosaic of his time away, with a small hand-drawn box for each day he had been gone. Inside each box was a tiny sketch and a meaningful quote. Emily turned the pages, her heart swelling with emotion as she saw what he had been holding on to. On one page was a vibrant sketch of a sunset over the desert, with the quote beneath it, "Wish you were here." On another drawing was a vast, open ocean accompanied by the words, "Looking into your eyes." He also included a simple drawing of a small Italian cafe he'd found, with the quote, "Let's go here someday." Further on, a sketch of the bird in a tree was paired with the words, "Miss your laugh." And a quiet drawing of his empty bunk was followed by the simple phrase, "Miss having you beside me." He watched her, a soft smile on his face. "Is this too cheesy?" he asked, a hint of a playful smirk in his eyes. He then reached over and flipped to the next empty page of the journal. "This," he said, pointing at the blank page, his voice dropping slightly, "is our future. The rest of the book is for us." our photos, our plans, our dreams and adventures that we'll make together. A wave of emotion washed over Emily, and she ran her fingers over his drawings. The gift was so perfectly him, a tangible promise that no matter how far he was, his heart was always with her. It was the most romantic gift he could have ever given her. "It's perfect," she whispered, her eyes shining. She leaned in and kissed his cheek. "That's why I love my cheesy man." A profound sense of gratitude filled her, a feeling so deep it made the time they had together feel like an even more precious gift. The next morning, Emily woke to the inviting smell of breakfast. Ethan had risen early, slipping out of bed while she was still soundly asleep. Quietly pulling on a pair of jeans and a light jacket, he stepped out the front door into the fresh, damp morning air. The rain had slowed to a gentle trickle, leaving the forest shrouded in a cool, misty haze. He made his way down a small trail to a sun-dappled clearing he discovered last fall, where he knew wild blackberries grew in abundance. He gathered a small, overflowing basket of dark, ripe berries, his fingers stained purple from the sweet juice. When he returned to the cabin, his cheeks were rosy from the cold, and the subtle scent of damp earth and fresh leaves clung to his clothes. He returned to the cabin, placing the fragrant bouquet of wildflowers he gathered on his way back from blackberry picking on a small table by her bedside, where their scent began to mingle with the cozy air of the room. He then went into the kitchen. The warm glow from the fire provided enough light for him to find the coffee pot, and he quietly began brewing a fresh pot. As the rich, earthy aroma filled the air, he toasted 2 pieces of bread, their subtle warmth filling the cabin, and prepared a bowl of yogurt, carefully folding in the wild blackberries he picked just moments before. Emily stirred from her sleep, a soft smile on her face as she inhaled the most comforting combination of scents she could imagine: fresh coffee and lavender. She opened her eyes to the soft light of the cabin and the sight of a small vase of lavender and wildflowers on her bedside table. She slowly got up and slipped into her housecoat, her feet finding the cool wood of the cabin floor. She went out to the kitchen, where she found Ethan preparing breakfast. He was standing by the counter, his back to her, focused on his task. The rich smell of coffee and toasting bread filled the air. She watched for a moment as he carefully folded wild berries into a bowl of yogurt, his movements precise and deliberate. The sight of him so present and at peace in their kitchen filled her with a wave of warmth. She wrapped her arms around his waist and kissed his back. "Good morning," she said, breathing him in. He chuckled softly, setting down the bowl to turn and wrap his arms around her. He held her tightly for a long moment, burying his face in her hair. "Morning," he finally whispered into her ear, a simple greeting that held all the love he couldn't put into words. He pulled back just enough to lean down and kiss her gently before guiding her to the counter, where, her warm coffee and breakfast were waiting. After breakfast, as they sat together, he reached for a backpack he had left by the door. "So," he began, a twinkle in his eye, "I wanted to take you somewhere." Emily glanced outside. The rain was still coming down in a steady curtain. "But it's raining," she said, a small smile playing on her lips. He zipped the pack closed with a soft click and grinned. "I've got us covered," he said with a playful wink, and held up a large, sturdy umbrella. "Come on, let's go for a walk." At that, Jasper's ears perked up and he immediately headed for the doorway, his tail wagging furiously. Sebastian, on the other hand, sat calmly on the cabin windowsill, cleaning his face with his paws as he watched the couple head out into the peaceful, rainy woods. Ethan opened the umbrella, holding it high over both their heads, and they stepped out into the steady rain. The sound, a gentle drum beat on the canopy above them. Emily's arm was linked firmly through his, drawing her close as they walked under a magnificent canopy of gold and crimson leaves, each a vibrant testament to the changing season. The air smelled of wet leaves and rich, damp earth, and with every step the leaves beneath their boots let out a soft chorus of crunches. As they hiked deeper into the woods, the air grew cooler, and the tiny birds wove through the branches, their songs a sweet melody in the quiet forest. Emily laughed as a chipmunk scurried under a thick brush, its tiny feet a blur. With her arm linked through his, she began to tell him everything he had missed, her voice a soft stream of stories, anecdotes, and little moments that made up her days. She spoke of the clients she had met, the challenges she had faced, and the small joys that filled her life, catching him up on everything he had missed. He listened intently, his gaze fixed on her, not caring about the rain. As they hiked deeper into the woods, the air smelling of wet leaves and fresh earth, the forest grew denser, the towering evergreens creating a hushed, quiet world around them. After a steeper climb up, the mountain path opened up, and they emerged onto a massive, flat boulder that jutted out from the mountainside. From this high perch, a vast, misty lake stretched out before them, its surface a shifting expanse of silver and gray under the rain. The clouds were low, wrapping around the peaks of the distant mountains, but the view from their rocky platform felt completely private, a secret world just for them. He unzipped his backpack, pulling out a small pop-up tent, which he set up quickly on the flat rock to shelter them, along with a thermos of hot soup and sandwiches he had packed for their lunch. Inside the tent, with the rain still pattering on the waterproof fabric around them, Emily snuggled closer to him. She looked at him and thought of all the things he had told her in his letters, the parts of his life she knew from his words. In that moment, as they lay together in the tent, listening to the rainfall, his hands cradling his head as she rested on his chest, he felt compelled to share something he'd always felt. "You know how much I love flying, right?" he began in a soft murmur. Each time still feels so surreal. You're just going faster than you can even comprehend. The world, just a blur of blues and grays. And for a moment, it feels like nothing on earth can touch you. You're completely free. He paused, a quiet reverence in his eyes. But the best part isn't flying, he continued, his gaze finding hers. The best part is landing. Every time my feet touch the ground, I just think about how lucky I am to be on Earth, because that's where you are. You're my ground, where I belong every time I come back. That's sweet, Emily said as she contemplated in her mind if this was the right time to give him something. She had planned this for weeks, and his words had just made it even more perfect. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, polished metal dog tag. She turned it over in his hand, and he saw that beautifully etched into the metal was a tiny photo of the two of them, the one she had taken on the very first night they moved into the cabin. On the other side, a single line of text was engraved. Feels like home. He looked at the small tag, his thumb tracing the etched lines of their faces. A slow smile spread across his lips as he understood. For them, a home wasn't a cabin in the woods or any physical house they would ever share, but the simple, profound feeling of being together. It was a tangible piece of that feeling he could now carry with him, a reminder that while his duty was to serve his country, his heart would always belong to her. That evening, the world seemed to narrow to the sound of the rain. They sat on the porch swing, its slow, rhythmic creak a gentle counterpoint to the steady drumming of water on the roof. Ethan's arms was a warm weight around Emily's shoulder as they swayed together, a quiet, shared moment where words were unnecessary. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart and smelling the damp, clean scent of his jacket, a sense of deep peace settling over her. But even with him so close, a poignant thought flickered through her mind. She was already missing him. She leaned into his face, her eyes still closed, a silent request for a kiss on her forehead. Ethan, knowing her so well without her speaking a word, tilted his head and pressed a soft, warm kiss there. As he did, he tightened his arms around her, a silent promise that he was right there with her, perfectly present, as they sat together, watching the rain fall. The next morning, the drive to the airport was quiet, each mile feeling heavy with the unspoken goodbye. He kept one hand on the wheel and the other wrapped around hers. A final moment of shared warmth and connection. At the gate, as he was about to depart, He pulled a small object from his pocket. It was a keychain of the Eiffel Tower, the tiny metal version of a monument she had always dreamed of seeing. He put it in her hand, his fingers lingering on hers. "When I come back, we're going," he said, a steady promise in his voice. "I just want you to have something to look forward to." He gave her one last kiss, a final touch that had to last him for months, and then turned to walk through the security gates. She watched him go, her heart aching as he disappeared from view, leaving only a familiar emptiness in his wake. But just as the doors were about to close, she saw him. He turned and came back, his steps swift and determined. He let his bag drop to the floor, the sound lost in the quiet commotion of the airport, and pulled her into his arms. Their lips met in one last, lingering kiss that held all the warmth of the fire from the night before. Not wanting to let her go, he pulled away slowly, their lips feeling the soft resistance of one another as they parted. She heard him swallow as he looked deep into her eyes, and with a gentle smile, he whispered, "I love you, Emily. Wait for me, okay?" He then finally turned and walked away, picking up his bag and running a hand through his hair, a gesture of quiet torment. As he disappeared, she closed her eyes, holding on to the warmth of his last kiss, a feeling she always knew as home. In her hand, she clutched the tiny Eiffel Tower keychain, a reminder of the dreams they would live out together when he could finally come home.